About a year and a half ago, the Brook Hills Free Methodist Church began to pray and ask God, where in the world could we partner? Where in the world could we be global Christians, have a global impact? And the process over several months, we prayed and fasted, and the Lord really allowed us to discern that we had an opportunity to partner with a small country in Africa called Liberia. And over the last 20 months, we've been there twice, and we've taken 4 different people from here to Liberia. And each time we've been there, we've met up with a gentleman, the Africa Area Director. He is the Free Methodist that's over all of the continent of Africa, and his name is Michael Reinen. And he's with us this morning with his lovely wife, Vicky, and they oversee the continent of Africa. And we have the privilege, and I consider it a privilege, to have him to come and to share with us and to give his heart and to talk to us about the work going on in Africa, but more specifically in Liberia, and to support us as we desire to further and strengthen our commitment in Liberia and to see how we best can see the Liberian people and the Free Methodist work in Liberia as an extension of the work that Brook Hills Free Methodist Church does. We believe that the circle of influence of what this body of believers, this faith family has, literally goes around the world, and we've seen it. And we're really excited about your faithful giving to missions, and those monies that go to Liberia are supporting a great work. And Brother Rufus Khan, who is our national leader in Africa or in Liberia, is grateful for the support and the assistance and the partnership that we have. So we welcome both Mike and Vicky, and Mike's going to come and share. So let's give a warm welcome to him as he comes.
Thank you, Pastor Bryce. Good morning. Pastor Bryce, I was going to say something about how fun this service has been.
Yeah.
But I think Vicky captured it pretty well on what she wrote on her card. Vicky, can you just stand up and say?
I said, if the Lord ever allows us to serve in the U.S. again, because we serve in Kenya and Africa, I hope he lets us live close enough to attend Brook Hills.
Yeah. It's very clear that you at Brook Hills have a people vision, just from what we've seen today. Even if I didn't know you from one previous visit and from time spent with Pastor Bryce and a few others, it's clear that you guys have a people vision. And I want to talk about people vision today, but a particular people vision, a people vision that was given to Jacob. So if we could take our minds way back to his time, to the time in his life, actually, when he was running away. He was running away from what had just taken place in his life, in his family, with Esau, his brother, and his parents. He had tricked his dad into giving him the blessing that was supposed to go to Esau. And his dad was astonished when he realized he had blessed the wrong son. And Esau got very angry when he learned what had happened, and word got out that he was so angry that he was planning to take Jacob's life once their father had passed away. And so with that kind of a thing going around in the community, Jacob's mother said, Jacob, you've got to get out of here. And with the sort of covering reason of going, that he needed to go back to their roots in order to get a wife, they sent Jacob back to Haran. So Jacob was really running away, but the story was he was going back there to get a wife. He left and was at the end of his first day's journey, probably had been walking for about a day, and sun was going down, he was feeling tired, got to thinking, I better find a place to sleep. There are no hotels out there. And found a place to lay down and needed a pillow, had no pillow. I don't know, the Bible doesn't give us enough information to know. I would have thought he would have had some sort of pack with him, but apparently the best choice he had was to choose a rock. And he found a rock that was able to serve as a pillow, laid down and went to sleep. And in the night, God gave him a vision that I call a people vision. There could be reason to call it an angel vision because what he saw in the vision was angels. He saw this stairway that was based on earth and went up to heaven. And there were angels going up and down the stairway. But at the top of the stairway, he saw the Lord. And the Lord spoke to him in this vision. He said, I am the Lord. I'm the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. And he said to Jacob, the land you're laying on, I'm going to give to you and your descendants. And your descendants are going to be like the dust of the earth, spreading out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. And Jacob, I'm going to be with you wherever you go. I'm going to be with you wherever you go. And I will stay with you until I've fulfilled all the promises that I've made to you. And that was the vision. And when you look at what the Lord said to him, I think it's clear it was a people vision. Think about this. Think about Jacob's situation at that moment in his life. He was running away from his family, running away from his brother who wanted to take his life. It had been a time of conflict, a few days of conflict, and a father who was unhappy that he had been tricked, and a mother who needed to send him away to keep him alive. He was what we might call he'd be the equivalent of the college students who just stood up and got prayed for here, in the sense that I think most of them are unmarried, young adults. That was Jacob's place in life at that moment. And he had to leave his family, the only circle of people that he had, and now he was out there a day's walk from anywhere, no place to sleep except the ground. He was alone. He was relationally in no man's land. He was, I think we could say, totally isolated. And into that sort of a mental situation, having nobody, God promises him everybody. He promises him a family because he says your descendants are going to spread out over the whole earth. And not only will they spread out, but through you and your descendants, I'm going to bless all peoples on the earth. And so it's an amazing contrast between the fact that Jacob had no people in his life at that moment, and yet God was planning to do an amazing thing in this world through people, and through his own people, through Jacob's own people, the people who would be his people. And so this was the people vision that God gave to Jacob on that night, in that night vision in the dream. It was a stunning vision. It was a vision that made Jacob afraid, as we might imagine. We have dreams, but this was a different dream. This was a dream that he knew God had confronted him and God had spoken to him. In fact, he was so awestruck by this that when he woke up from that dream, he was trying to piece things together in his mind. And he said, this place is the house of God. It's the gateway to heaven. And so when he got up in the morning, he took that stone and set it up and did a little ceremony. He poured some oil on it. And he responded to God, God, you will be my God. If you do all these things you've said that you'll do for me, you will be my God, and I will serve you, and of whatever you give me, I will give back 1/10 to you. So they kind of made a covenant there. In the next few days, that vision started to be fulfilled. Jacob went on his journey, met up with his uncle Laban, which is who he was hoping to find, actually met up with Laban's daughter Rachel, and within a month had fallen in love with Rachel. Laban agreed that Jacob could work for Laban for 7 years, and then he could have Rachel as his wife. He worked 7 years, and if you're a Bible reader, you know that a little swap was made there, and Jacob got Leah instead of Rachel. But after a week's time, he then got Rachel also, and worked another 7 years to fulfill the bride price for the other wife. So he worked these 14 years, and then he worked some more years for Laban and was paid in flocks and herds. So Jacob spent a lot of time with Laban, but over those years, with his wives and their housemaids, Jacob had children, and he had 12 children. 12 sons, at least. He also had daughters, but the sons became the heads of the tribes of Israel. And through one of those sons, Judah, there eventually came a son, after some hundreds of years, whose name was Jesus. Jesus, who came then to be called the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus, the one through whom people's sins are forgiven. Jesus, the one through whom all peoples on earth can be blessed by having the power of sin broken in their life. Jesus, the one through whom all peoples on earth can be made complete, meaning that they have everything they need for life and godliness. This is how central Jesus was to the fulfillment of Jacob's people vision. Jesus was also so central to that vision that people would become a new creation in Him. A new creation that meant that in this life, people can become partakers of the divine nature. Their lives can be lived in true righteousness and holiness. And so that's I might call it the mid-range fulfillment of Jacob's people vision. I mean, it's a fulfillment. In one way, it was the ultimate fulfillment because none of that blessing could come to the peoples of this earth without Jesus. So it was the ultimate fulfillment, but in another way, it's the mid-range fulfillment because everything that happened after Jesus was really the outworking of that people vision that Jacob got, which said, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. So after Jesus is when we find people's lives being transformed by the gospel, the power of God, which is the salvation to anyone who believes. So after Jesus, about 1900 years, there were some people who decided to call themselves Free Methodists. They made that decision in 1860. They formed themselves as the Free Methodist Church, and in 25 years, they decided we can't just stay here as we are in 1860 in the United States. They weren't even complete at that time. I don't know how many states we had at that time. But they said, we can't just stay here. There's a world that needs to be won to Christ. And we need to send missionaries to many places in this world. And in 1885, the Free Methodist Church sent their first missionaries out. You know where they went? Liberia. Reverend and Mrs. Noyes were a couple, and then Mary Carpenter was a single lady who went with them. The three of them went to Liberia in September of 1885. By Christmas time, Mary Carpenter had gotten sick, and by January 3rd, she died. Within a few months, Reverend and Mrs. Noyes decided they needed to go back home. So they went back to the U.S. I mean, it's a sad story to tell that they went back. They didn't stay. I guess it was because of the death of Mary Carpenter. But for 113 years, Free Methodists forgot about Liberia. And I'm sorry to say that too. When I've told that in Africa, among our West African guys, Rufus and others in West Africa, they say, man, if only they would have stayed, Free Methodists would have been so much farther ahead in their work in West Africa. But that's how it went. And that's how the Free Methodist people vision played out. They had a vision for Liberia, but there was a 113-year hiatus in there when nothing was done. So in 1998, our family was in Nigeria. We were in our first term of service, and I was attached to a Bible college in the city of Owerri. One of the students I had was a Liberian refugee who was scholarshiped at the school. I got to know him a little bit. His name was Theo Roberts. And Theo finished his schooling, but while he and his wife Rowena were there at the school, they became regular worshipers at our Free Methodist Fellowship. It was a house fellowship, and not in our house, but in one of the students' homes. And when he finished his time of studies there, he said, I'd like to go back to Liberia and start the Free Methodist Church there. We said, go for it. So in 1998, he went back to Liberia because the war had calmed down enough that he felt it was time to go back. And Theo Roberts got a few fellowships started for us in Liberia. And in my view of the whole story, that's the people vision playing out a little bit further in Liberia. Now, there were some of the things that those blessings in Christ work out in people's lives that hadn't yet been worked out in Theo's life, and there were some troubles that came up, and the work in Liberia was actually closed down for a few years, the Free Methodist work. And then it was reopened in 2005. It was reopened without specific leadership in place, but we formally were reconnected with the Free Methodists in Liberia. And then in 2008, I believe it was, John and Melinda Henry were sent as missionaries there. And they started to work with Rufus and several other pastors, again, without yet determining who really needs to be in the lead role. The short story is there were 3 groups that were merging together. And we felt it was important for a true merging of those groups to take place before a selection of leadership would be made. And it has played out pretty well. In 2010, we all agreed that it looked like Rufus was the one the Lord was pointing to as the one who should be the leader of the Free Methodist work in Liberia. And so in 2010, he was appointed as leader of that work. Then, in 2012, as Pastor Bryce was just mentioning a little bit ago, we got in touch. And you guys were exploring, where is it that the Lord is pointing us to really have engagement in this world? More than just sending support, but a way that we can be a part of it. We can engage as a congregation, some of us even going there. And so we explored, we prayed together, and discerned to the best of our ability that the Lord was saying, it's Liberia. So Pastor Bryce and Mike and Jim on the first trip, that was Mike Dite and Jim Hazlett, and we made that first trip in June of last year. And it was a great trip. Just to give you guys a little insight that I don't know if they have reported back to you, but when I was here in April of last year, I had an opportunity to share with you guys as a congregation, but after church, we had a meeting that day with Mike and Jim and Pastor Bryce. And I told them that when they get there, it's going to be hard for them. My guess was it would be hard for them for this reason. They're going to see all kinds of things that they will want to do, and that they'll say, we could help with this. But I told them, just hang on to those thoughts, because we need to hear what the vision of the Liberian people is, and then Brook Hills can make a decision of how they want to connect with the ministry that's on the ground there. And they said, sure, no problem, we'll do that. And sure enough, I think at the end of every one of our first 3 days there, we sat together in the guest house talking about all the things that could be done to help in Liberia. And I'm not sure that I needed to remind them. I think they remembered on their own They said, yeah, but we know, Mike, we have to just wait till we have that meeting with the Liberia leadership. They really did a great job. But it's a challenge, isn't it? You see so much there that you can do. You see people and you see things that could be done. And if you're a person who has people vision, you think, man, we could really do this or we could really do that. But it worked out well, and I believe it was the Holy Spirit's working that helped us then to hear the vision of the Liberia leadership. We sat with Pastor Rufus and other pastors who were leaders there, and they shared with us what their vision was. And then the Brook Hills delegation was able to take a look at that vision, talk among themselves, and then respond to the Liberia leadership and say, this is how we think that we would like to be part of your work here since you've told us this is what you're doing. And if you accept it, we'd like to be partners in this way. And so a partnership was formed at that time. And then in January of this year, Mike Rice and Pastor Bryce and I made a visit there. And we had that 12-hour or more crazy journey across land to get to Zwedru and had a great time there. But I'm just running through these events because, in my view, we are all part of this people vision that came to Jacob thousands of years ago. A vision that God gave him, saying that all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. And it's not for us to be the ones who bless all peoples on earth, but it's for us to be involved in that. Our first involvement, each one of us, is we get saved. We find salvation ourselves, but then we realize there's a kingdom enterprise going on in this world, and I'm not only called to be a child of God by getting saved, getting to know Christ as Lord in my life, but I'm called to be part of what God is doing in this world. And if you study and look at it from this perspective at least, you will see that Jacob had a people vision, and you get a little slice of that. You get a part of that. You have the privilege of participating in that people vision. And so the way I'm looking at it and sharing with you today is that Brook Hills Free Methodist Church has a part in that people vision that Jacob received so long ago. In fact, we could even say that that part that you have is playing out in a sense that somebody over there in Liberia named Rufus is like a staff member from Brook Hills Free Methodist Church. He's on assignment in Liberia. He happens to be from Liberia, but he's on assignment there because of that partnership. It's not quite technically a staff member because direction doesn't really come from here to there. But on the other hand, it is like a staff member because there's a partnership and there's support that you guys are giving to Rufus over there. And so I talked to Rufus this week, and he gave me an update on some things, and I wanted to share a couple of those things with you. One is that Pastor Mary Toe is a lady who has planted a church there. On our most recent visit, Mike Rice and Pastor Bryce visited with me the church that Mary had recently started, or fairly recently started. And it was the mud block constructed building. I think we were, Mount Barclay, yep, good. And that church, honestly, the building was kind of ugly because mud blocks. I mean, what else is it going to look like? And I remember we were talking with them about what their next step was. The next step would be to buy cement. They mix up the cement, then they plaster the mud brick walls, and then it looks just like a regular cement block building, and then they paint it. That's been done. They've finished that. But the even better news is Sister Mary Toe has started another church plant. I didn't even know that was coming. And so she has started a second church plant. Reverend Flomo, we have two ordained pastors in Liberia, Rufus and Joseph Flomo. This is a photo of Reverend Flomo. Reverend Flomo has a church that he has been pastoring for several years, the Diamond Creek Church. He has been working for about a year now with one or two guys at different times in the period. He's had one or he's had two, but he's working with two guys to train them as church planter pastors. So there's at least one church plant that's been started by one of them, but I learned from Rufus that now a second church plant has been started under Joseph Flomo's direction. So we're praising the Lord for that. On our first trip with Brook Hills, we visited Cornerstone in Buchanan. Am I right? On that first visit. That church has started some new evangelistic work in their area. Buchanan is a region, and our Cornerstone church there is a large church, relatively speaking, in that city. But there's a whole region there where we have several other churches. And they're doing some new evangelistic work in a new area. So that was part of Rufus's report. Also, our Liberia churches seek to do community outreach. They call it the social arm of their work. And one of the ways they do that is by starting schools in their churches, what we would call elementary schools or primary schools. And when we were there on our first visit at the Great Commission Church, you have maybe seen pictures of Pastor Bryce among a whole flood of students wearing orange and blue uniforms. That's Great Commission School. Great Commission School has built 2 new classrooms because they need classrooms for more students. And so that school is growing. Joseph Flomo's church has started a school since our visit in January. So they've got a school going. Joseph's wife is the one serving as the headmistress of that school. And one other church has a plan to start a school, but it hasn't actually gotten started. He was just telling me they've got plans made to start a school at this other church. So those are highlights of the report that Rufus gave me this week. And I wanted to share those with you in the context of this viewing of your connection with Liberia in its place in history, because I really see it as that kind of a connection. God gave that people vision to Jacob. It's a people vision that was not exclusively for Jacob in the sense that anybody who becomes part of the fulfillment of that vision also acquires the vision of having people vision. And it's clear, as we've been worshiping this morning, that you guys have people vision. I mean, from Oklahoma to baptisms to praying for school students, having a vision for people who might not have the opportunities that others have, and so let's help them get some prom dresses. All kinds of things like that are all part of having people vision. So I don't share with you Jacob's people vision so that you will get a people vision. You've got that. But I wanted to be sure that you think of your connection with Liberia as part of that people vision, because it is. People's lives are being touched there as new churches are started. By the way, when we start churches in Africa, we normally, or let me say in a certain model of church planting that we're using there, we're basically having house church. So where we have house churches there, we're starting a new church. If we have 2 or 3 people together that are meeting on a regular basis, we say that's a church. And we expect it to grow because we expect the things that are going to happen in that small nucleus of people is going to result in more people coming to the Lord through what they're doing, and that group to grow. And that's a church. And we put deliberately a small emphasis on building for them. It's up to them if they want to have a place to meet other than a house or other than meeting under a tree. No problem. They're encouraged to move ahead with that, and over 90% of them do. But we emphasize that the church is the people, and God is helping us, I think, to get that communicated. So what's happening in Liberia is a fulfillment of Jacob's people vision, but it's not just a fulfillment of that. It's a fulfillment of that people vision, particularly when I talk about the work that we're involved in. It's a people vision that you're part of. And I want to say thank you for your part in that. Thank you for being a part of the people vision that Free Methodists have in Liberia. And if you haven't really thought of it that way, or if you haven't seen it in this truly biblical way that it's connected, I hope you'll be looking at it that way from this point forward. And in the months to come and in the years to come, I would hope that you would say, okay, if it's that real of a connection with what God has actually done in history that I know of from the Bible, if that's really what our connection is, then I want to be somebody who is praying for Liberia and the work that's going on there, and for some whose lives are such that they feel they would like to go there, we hope those opportunities will come to you. But at a minimum, I hope that you will all be someone who says, I will have some kind of effort in my life to be praying for the work in Liberia. And if you ever reach a point where you feel like, I haven't heard anything about Liberia lately, I'd like to get some news, let us know. Vicki and I have a table in the foyer, lobby out there, and if you would like to have my email address, I'd love to write it down for you out there. It's mjreinen@yahoo.com. Reinen is R-E-Y-N-E-N. Feel free to write me anytime that you would like news from Liberia, and if I don't have current news, I'll get current news for you and send it back to you. Or you can ask Pastor Bryce or maybe even others here at the church who would be willing to say, let me shoot Mike an email, and I will see if we can get you some news on that. Because we want you to have news as often as you need it. We'll do our best to feed you news, but if you haven't gotten news, we want you to have it so that you can be praying for Liberia. And again, thank you for your support of the work there. We're pleased about the partnership, and I want to be a good member in that partnership, and hope that you'll feel free to let me know if there's anything I can do to help advance the partnership. So God bless you, and thanks for thinking of the people vision in this way today.